On April 22, 2025, a deadly terrorist attack strikes the Baisaran Valley near Pahalgam in Indian-administered Jammu and Kashmir. 27 people, including 26 Indians and 1 Nepali, are killed, and 17 others are injured. This is one of the deadliest attacks against Indian civilians since the Mumbai attacks of 2008, which claimed more than 160 lives. The Resistance Front, a group that New Delhi links to the Pakistani Islamist movement Lashkar-e-Taiba, claims responsibility for the attack. In response, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi promises to identify, track down, and punish those responsible, announcing strict measures. Closure of the only border crossing point with Pakistan, deterioration of diplomatic relations, and suspension of the 1960 treaty on sharing the waters of the Indus River. Islamabad, for its part, warns that any attempt to divert these waters would be considered an act of war. Limited proxy war, show of force, border skirmish, water war, humanitarian crisis. Welcome to this new episode of violence between the two nuclear powers of the Indian subcontinent on the brink of war. The Indian response to the April 22 attack was immediate and firm. A special meeting of the Security Cabinet confirmed Pakistan's alleged links to the attack. But more than the truth of the accusations, it's the nature of the decisions made by New Delhi that matters in understanding the current dynamic. Among the measures announced, India has suspended the 1960 treaty on the sharing of the waters of the Indus River, a historic agreement that was never challenged during the 3 previous Indo-Pakistani wars. This suspension alone is a textbook case where water becomes a geopolitical tool. New Delhi also declared several Pakistani defense advisors in New Delhi persona non grata, ordered their departure, and reduced its diplomatic staff in Islamabad from 55 to 30 members. The famous Atari Wagah land border post, the only crossing point between the two countries, was closed and the issuance of special visas to Pakistanis was suspended. In addition, Pakistani nationals in India were ordered to leave the country by the end of April. Economically, bilateral trade, already worth less than $1 billion in 2023, has now almost come to a halt. These measures will mainly affect cross-border families, Pakistani patients traveling to India for specialized medical care, as well as businesses that depend on the transit of goods. The closure of the border and the suspension of visas break human, cultural, and medical ties, reinforcing mutual isolation in favor of heightened nationalism in both countries. While the Indian and Pakistani governments are under strong popular pressure to adopt a firm stance. In India, the nationalist rhetoric of Narendra Modi's party and the perception of an existential threat fuel the demand for a strong response. In Pakistan, denouncing Indian acts of war and defending the Kashmiri cause have become drivers of national unity in a country where the state apparatus, remember, has been in crisis for years. I invite you to watch the dedicated video. Pakistan responded by closing its airspace to Indian airlines, suspending all bilateral trade, including through third countries, and canceling visas for Indian nationals, except, which may interest some subscribers, for Sikh pilgrims. Just like India did regarding the sharing of the Indus River waters, Islamabad has also threatened to withdraw from key bilateral agreements, including the 1972 Simla Agreement, which governs the line of control and the ceasefire in Kashmir. This series of measures, unprecedented in decades, simply reflects a clear intention for a total break between the two powers and makes any short-term de-escalation difficult. But this is not something new. Since the partition of British Raj in 1947, Kashmir has remained the main source of tension between India and Pakistan. 3 major wars and multiple low-intensity conflicts have broken out over this region, claimed by both states. The armed insurgency, which began in the late 1980s, led to the exodus of Hindus from Kashmir and the increasing militarization of the area by the Indian Army. The armed insurgents in the region, supported by many Kashmiri Muslims, have long resisted Indian rule, seeking either integration with Pakistan or independence, with episodes of violence and attacks by Islamist groups for decades. India therefore accuses Pakistan of actively supporting the armed groups operating in Kashmir, while Islamabad presents these movements as a legitimate struggle for the self-determination of the Kashmiris. Although it is not clear whether Pakistani agencies were involved in the latest attack in the region, there is a well-documented history of support for separatists based in Jammu and Kashmir, which has fueled ongoing violence in the region. The Pulwama attack in 2019, for example, killed 40 members of the Indian forces. It had already caused a major escalation, with Indian airstrikes in Pakistan and aerial clashes not seen since 1971. It was at that moment that India decided to reform Article 370 of the Indian Constitution. This article granted a special status allowing the territory of Jammu and Kashmir to have its own constitution and considerable autonomy. The region was therefore reclassified as a union territory, placing it under the direct administration of New Delhi and dividing the eastern half to create the separate territory of Ladakh. India's objective is clear: to further integrate Jammu and Kashmir with the rest of India and increase the military presence in this key region straddling Pakistan and China. Sporadic attacks have also become a concern for New Delhi. The resistance front has been at the forefront of these attacks and has claimed responsibility for several since 2019, causing mass exoduses of outsiders and reviving fears of separatism in the region. So, is this nuclear war? Well, for now, both sides seem to favor limited responses with exchanges of fire at the border and are avoiding uncontrolled escalation. But India is in the midst of nation building under Modi's leadership, which makes the possibility of retaliatory strikes high. The same goes for Pakistan, which is experiencing state decline and where political power dominated by the army might see this as an opportunity to strengthen national unity. In any case, it is certain that both belligerents will increase their surveillance efforts on both sides, which will inevitably raise the risk of armed clashes at the border. India will probably mobilize limited forces near Kashmir, especially air assets, as part of possible military operations, like in 2019. In response, Pakistan is already strengthening its defensive positions and mobilizing its own assets in the region. India could also deploy special forces for operations like those it carried out in response to a terrorist attack in 2016. Pakistan, on its side, could then allow or facilitate infiltrations by Islamist and separatist groups, intensify military activity along the line of control, test its conventional tactical missiles, or carry out shows of force. So we would be in a limited war with objectives that are more political than military, but with a high risk of mistakes and therefore escalation, especially in a context of military mobilization, rising nationalism, and human stress with evacuations of citizens on both sides. India's suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty is evidence of this shift in the historical paradigm. This treaty, signed in 1960 under the auspices of the World Bank, allows for the management of shared river systems after the 1947 partition and had survived all wars and major crises between the two countries. The treaty granted India control over the eastern rivers, which mainly flow through India before reaching Pakistan, while granting Pakistan rights over the western rivers. The Indus Basin is vital for Pakistan. It provides about 154.3 million acre-feet of water per year. Besides the issue of drinking water, 80% of its agriculture depends on this water, as well as a third of its hydroelectricity. Any lasting reduction in downstream flows could have dramatic, even humanitarian, consequences for Punjab and Sindh, two key agricultural regions, and even for all of Pakistan, which is already on the brink of collapse. Pakistan could bring the case to an international court such as the International Court of Justice, but with little hope for results expected. Although the World Bank has a role to play in appointing neutral experts and facilitating the resolution of disputes, it might not be able to enforce the suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty in an increasingly tense world, especially in the face of the emerging Indian superpower. India is now openly threatening to withhold the waters of the Indus, but it could not stop the flow without heavy infrastructure, which would take years to build and gives Pakistan a bit of respite. Nevertheless, we are indeed in a water war that is just beginning, could affect millions of people, and could increase the risk of escalation if Pakistan finds itself backed into a corner, unless a new challenger comes to take advantage of the situation. Since the 2020 clashes in the Galwan Valley in Indian Ladakh, China has strengthened its military presence all along the line of actual control. It has deployed between 20,000 and 25,000 soldiers in the Ngari and Ringaze prefectures in Xinjiang province, Tibet, on the border of Jammu and Kashmir and Indian Sikkim. These forces are supported by artillery, armored vehicles, air defense systems, and advanced logistics. Thanks to a developed road and rail network, including highways G219 and G315, as well as the Golmud-Lhasa and Ringaze Railway, China can mobilize more than 50,000 troops in a few days. China has expanded its logistics sites throughout the strategic regions of Tibet and neighboring Xinjiang, and maintains outposts such as at Burong and Lunsei. These facilities are limited by the region's extreme conditions, but they facilitate operations launched from larger bases, such as at Ringaze, Lhasa, Gongar, or Otan, where fighter jets, transport aircraft, and H-6K strategic bombers are regularly deployed and help extend the range of strikes despite altitude constraints. Constant aerial surveillance and a multi-layered air defense network, including long and medium-range missiles, short-range mobile platforms, and integrated radars, strengthen Beijing's ability to control the border RSSI. For its part, India maintains between 90,000 and 120,000 soldiers in the three key regions of the LAC, Ladakh, Sikkim, and Arunachal Pradesh. India does not have China's logistics infrastructure, but benefits from better troop pre-positioning and high-altitude airlift capability, with strategic aircraft operating from bases such as Leh and Nyoma. But since 2020, New Delhi has been closing its logistics gap and has accelerated the development of its border infrastructure. By building more than 60 bridges and 1,400 kilometers of roads, including all-weather routes and tunnels, to ensure permanent deployments. Unlike China, which relies on bases that are farther away, between 150 and 300 kilometers from the LAC, supported by a multi-layered defense in depth, India maintains forces and strengthens their capabilities less than 50 kilometers from the border to enable a rapid tactical response and a presence that serves as a deterrent. Since 2022, India has been the world's fifth largest economy and is seeking to strengthen its global role. It also works closely with the United States in the fields of defense, intelligence, technology, and trade. Washington considers New Delhi a key strategic ally to contain China's rise in Asia, even more so under Donald Trump's administration. The United States has included India in its vast Indo-Pacific security architecture plan, notably through the Quad and the Indo-Pacific Command. Ideally, they also want India to become a manufacturing alternative to China. But China is not fooled and is trying to break this containment strategy and find access to the sea through large projects in Pakistan and Myanmar, which I explained in a previous video. The conflict with Pakistan comes at the worst possible time for American geopolitics. The persistence of Indo-Pakistani tensions and the rise of Chinese military power complicate this entire strategy. For the United States, India is diverting resources and attention that would normally be dedicated to China toward Pakistan, especially in the geopolitical competition against China on the high seas. As you know, Washington is seeking to disengage from global conflicts and ration its resources, but now also has to focus on the stability of the Indian subcontinent, where a nuclear conflict between India and Pakistan would represent a major threat in an increasingly volatile region. The new escalation between India and Pakistan in Kashmir illustrates the fragility of the regional balance in South Asia. While the two nuclear powers seem to favor a limited war for now, the rise of nationalism, increased militarization, and the issue of water pose a real risk of escalation. Beyond the bilateral standoff, this crisis is also taking place in an increasingly multipolar international context. China could take advantage of India's distraction to strengthen its presence on the Himalayan border, while the United States sees its Indo-Pacific strategy weakened by the instability of the Indian subcontinent. More than ever, the situation in Kashmir reminds us that local conflicts can quickly become global issues at a time when every power is trying to defend its interests in a changing world. The evolution of this crisis will be a real test for the ability of regional and international actors to manage competition without slipping into uncontrolled confrontation. Let me remind you of the simple actions that make a difference, like subscribe so you don't miss any of our content, and share it with as many people as possible. Thanks to the YouTube members for directly and financially supporting the channel, and thanks to all of you for your loyalty. This was Quentin for Terra Bellum. See you next time.